Today we're joined by none other than a true legend in the sport of professional wrestling. I don't know how you want me to introduce you, Mock and Singh, Bastion Booger. You tell me. Mike Shaw.
Well, they all get used nowadays. Actually, it's funny on the street, more people still refer to me as Norman. I got people walk up to me and just walk up and say, "Norman, how you doing?" And it's funny. People really like that character, and unfortunately it got killed off by some piss poor management down in Atlanta. But most people call me that or Bastion Booger. Either one's good.
Okay. I guess let's talk early about your career, how you got started in the business. Were you a wrestling fan growing up?
No, I never seen a professional wrestling match in my life. I grew up in northern Michigan, and we didn't have any wrestling on TV. The area I grew up in, we only had 2 TV channels when I was a kid. I'm from a small town of 300 people, and we didn't have any TV to watch. And every now and then, we'd catch a little bit of an old AWA Vern Gagne show on TV at 11 o'clock on Saturday night or whatever, if you got lucky. And that's the only time I'd ever seen wrestling. I never seen a live wrestling match until I was 21 years old.
Oh, wow.
I'd never seen one even, so I did nothing about it. I wrestled in high school, and I wrestled a little bit of some open college tournaments, and I did a little bit of amateur wrestling. I coached wrestling for a couple of years. I was the youngest head varsity wrestling coach in the state of Michigan. I coached at 18 years old, and I got out of that, and then I did some other things. I held a professional boxing license for a while. I got into wrestling. Basically, I got into the professional wrestling when I went down to Florida. I was trying out for a professional slow pitch softball team, and I met a couple of wrestlers, and I started talking to them, and then I went up to Kowalski School in Boston and got trained there.
So when you were down in Florida, it was for what company was that? For Florida Championship Wrestling?
No, I hadn't started in the business yet. I was actually just living down in Florida, and I met an old wrestler by the name of Farmer Bill. He was working I got a job down there in a car, working for a car company, and he worked in another car company that I delivered to, and he kept telling me, "Why don't you try wrestling?" And I didn't want to. I kept trying to put it off, and then I got into it after that.
Okay. Also, let's talk about your amateur background. You talked a little bit about you wrestled. Did you go to college at all, or no?
No, I never ended up going to college. I'll tell you what happened. I left high school. I was 52-9 in high school. Back then, you didn't get a whole lot of wrestling matches in a year. Nowadays, these kids are getting 50, 60 a year with tournaments and everything else. But the area I grew up in, wrestling wasn't that big. I didn't even have wrestling in my high school until I was a sophomore. We didn't have a team even. And then I got going at that, and I enjoyed it. And then I wrestled in some college open tournaments and did fairly well in those. And I was going to go to Northern Michigan University. They had a wrestling program at that time, pretty good program. And my father passed away. When my father passed away, I ended up staying home with my mother for about a year after that. Then I never ever went to school after that. I never went back to college, so I kind of ended everything right there.
Right.
So
do you think your amateur background helped you get into the business? I mean, did it help you a little bit?
I don't think it mattered.
Right.
I don't think nobody cared. You were kind of an oddity back then if you got in the wrestling business and you had a little bit of an amateur career. I mean, there were some great amateur wrestlers in the business when I was in the business. The Steiners and Mike Rotundo and Steve Williams. I mean, there were some guys who could really wrestle. I was never close to that league. I mean, these guys were elite. But it was kind of odd. I went to wrestle. I was wrestling for Kowalski around the Boston area, and they sent me to a show, one of Vince Senior shows when it was the WWF, I guess it was back then. When they would come through the Boston area, if they were shorter guys, they would call them up and send somebody from the school. And Pedro Morales, who was the Intercontinental Champion or had just been the WWF World Champion at that time, didn't want to wrestle me because he was afraid that I may tie him up or hurt him.
Wow.
And he actually said out loud, "I'm not wrestling this guy," because he amateur wrestled. So I don't think it helped you at all back then. I really don't.
What was the training like at the Kowalski school?
Kowalski had a decent school. I enjoyed being around Walter. He helped me out a lot. Like I said, I come from a small town in northern Michigan, and I flew into Boston. I was kind of awed by the whole deal, and Kowalski took pretty good care of me. The training was good. I think we went Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, if I remember right. We trained at the old Salem, Mass YMCA back then. I think it's a retirement home or something now. I don't think the building's even there anymore. But we trained hard, and we would train. It was a little hot gym upstairs, no air conditioning, no nothing. But we trained hard, and Walter he's a legend in this business, and he trained us right. He taught us to wrestle, taught us to work, and taught us to respect the business, which has got lost in the 20 years since then. Guys don't seem to worry about that anymore.
Right. Did you ever get, scared off during training or said, this is too much?
No. I seen a lot of guys come and go. It was funny. I had a friend from New Hampshire. He was in the business for quite a while. His name is Danny Patiglio. He wrestled as Danny O out in Vancouver with me for a while, and he went down to California and wrestled for a couple of promotions, and we were horsing around there. We had a black guy come in from Alabama or someplace, and he was a really good bump taker, Danny was, and we backed him into the corner, and I took him out and gave him a big beeline. He took his big, huge bump. The guy opened the door and walked out and never came back. So scared the hell out of him, but, yeah, he never come back. So, some guys didn't last long. Guys didn't last a week. Some guys didn't last a workout. Or,
right.
Yeah, it's,
I guess take us through your training as far as, what did you learn first? Psychology, bumping, or...
No, I don't think we got into bumping too much. We learned Kowalski was more into the psychology of the business. He was more into building up the business. I mean, he was such a good heel. I mean, he was a tremendous heel. He taught us how to work and how to put a match together. And it was funny back then. Never once did he ever tell us anything about the business that that anything was set up or anything. I mean, he just taught us to work and taught us moves and kind of left everything up to us to figure the rest out. And he never once uttered the words, because he didn't know who was going to quit or go expose the business or what, And
right.
I remember we were eating dinner one night together, and we had a couple of the young students with us, and somebody asked him who his partner was when he was the executioners, and one of the young students blurted it out. This was 10 years after they hadn't been the executioners anymore. Kowalski just reamed them out.
Wow.
Whenever we wore masks, why do you want to expose that? And so he protected it. They protected it every day.
Right.
And that's the way we started. Hell, when I was first couple of years I was in the business, the first 10 years I was in the business, if you were in a bar or a restaurant and if you were a heel and a babyface walked in, you left. You didn't even stay. I mean, now they basically holding hands going through airports and everything else, so it's just so much different. It's unbelievable.
I liked it back then, by the way.
Yeah, me too.
It was better. As far as training, what was the hardest thing for you to pick up in training?
I think the hardest thing, like we talked about earlier, I think the hardest thing was breaking off the amateur attitude. I've seen a lot of good amateur wrestlers come. Like, I spent 7 years in Calgary, and Stu Hart was always fascinated with these wrestlers and bodybuilders and weightlifters. And a lot of amateur wrestlers can't get the mentality that it's a business. They just can't figure that out. And I think it took me a little while to realize it was a business, and it really kills their ego if they have to lose or do a job or something. I mean, it just crushes them. And you got to realize that you're in a business now. I mean, it's just that. But I've seen a lot of them gold medal winners, Olympic wrestlers, college wrestling champions that just couldn't make it in this business, because they couldn't separate it.
Right. Huh. As far as your first match, what are your memories of your first match?
My first match was in Westerly, Rhode Island. I went down there and wrestled a guy by the name of TV Ricky Sexton, who probably was more in love with himself than he was anybody else in the world. I don't know if you were familiar with old Ricky or not, but we came back into the locker room in Rhode Island. It was Kowalski's promotion, and we came back in, and I ended up having close to 4,000 or 5,000 matches in my career. And when we walked back in the locker room, Ricky Sexton said to me, "Hey, kid, that's the best match you'll ever have in your life." Huh. And I remember Kowalski blurted out, "I fucking hope it's not, because it stunk."
Right.
So kind of killed my ego, and it kind of killed Ricky's ego too, because he'd been around for about 30 years, I guess. And but that was and he always bragged about he had the best calves in the business. Ricky Sexton used to always do these calf raisers. And so I'm a young kid in this locker room thinking, "Yeah, this guy's a kook." I couldn't believe the guys were that worried about things like that, So
right.
Yeah.
Watch thousands of exclusive shoot interviews right now on TitleMatchNetwork.com.